Welcome to Soul Therapy. I'm Katie.
And I'm Kate, and this is the space where we take a deep breath, dive into healing, and laugh a little along the way.
Think of this as your cozy corner for exploring how to feel better, grow stronger, and live with more ease.
We'll chat about everything from practical tools to soulful insights, all designed to help you connect with yourself and navigate life's ups and downs.
We've put together this Soul Therapy session series to help you to come back into alignment.
By alignment, we mean living with expression of your true self and values, feeling centered and grounded in yourself, and with an inner peace, trusting in the flow of life and your role within it.
So listen along and join in with the exercises, and let us know how you get on. Ready?
Let's do this.
Welcome to Soul Therapy. I'm Katie.
And I'm Kate, and today we're going to be talking about workplace and careers.
So I think this is something that's really big in all our lives. Most of us spend a huge amount of hours of our lives at work or thinking about work, engaging with work in some way, or our career in some way. So this is huge. This is something that people can often feel is either going very, very well or is not going very well at all.
And based on the statistics that I've been reading recently, it's not going very well. So I was reading US workers, apparently 88% are feeling burnt out and considering quitting their job. So I would almost go as far as to say majority of people are not satisfied currently with the current work that they're doing.
Yeah, that's huge. That's absolutely huge. And it makes a huge impact on other areas of life, I think, because when one area feels out of whack like that, it really has an impact on other areas too. Even other things that are going well can suddenly feel like this issue is kind of creeping into them. Your mind can start rotating over the issue. And this is kind of the Sunday evening feeling, right? So a lot of people I've spoken to describe this Sunday evening feel. Already Monday morning has seeped into their thought process. Maybe even as early as kind of Sunday afternoon or even Sunday morning. I know people, and actually I used to be one of those people once upon a time, who wake up on a Sunday morning already thinking about Monday.
Yes.
Not so much dreading. I was never in a process of dreading, but it was present in my mind. And so I can really feel for people who have that there, because if it's really not going well and they're already thinking about it on the Sunday morning, then if they're having the weekend off, like a lot of people do, then half their weekend is actually taken up thinking about going back to work on the Monday.
Right. It really makes you wonder, like, how much time we're actually spending just being at peace in our lives, right? Because everyone usually, if you're working that Monday to Friday, Fridays are great. You have the weekend to look forward to. You leave work on Friday afternoon, you're feeling great Friday night, then you have one day Saturday. And then, like you said, usually Sunday you wake up and it's just like, oh, I gotta go back to work tomorrow. And then it's like, oh, and I also have this checklist of things that I need to do that I don't really prioritize during the week. I'm prioritizing work. And then they're gone back to work again, right? So it's kind of just like this
wheel
of like work Monday to Friday, enjoy Saturday, Friday night, and then prepare for work again.
Back on the hamster wheel kind
Back
of
on the
feel.
hamster wheel.
Definitely I can understand how that week rotation can kind of feel like that, and how time feels like it's rushing by then as well. Because actually there are studies looking into how we perceive time, and we actually perceive time as being extended when things are different, when things are changing. And so when things are similar or on repeat, we actually experience time speeding up. Our experience of it is that it's moving faster. So this can really help. This can also be a real tip for people. If you feel that time is moving really fast, well, of course, that's possibly because you're very busy.
Right.
But trying to make some space to do something that's different and out of routine actually can really help to feel that time is elongating again, to stretch your perception of that time out.
Right. And it's so easy to get into the hamster wheel, like you said,
Mm.
of almost just being in robotic mode.
Mm.
And it's always surprising how often you hear people say, oh, time has just flown by.
Mm.
Or even people sit and reflect and be like, I don't even know what happened this week. Like they're literally kind of
Yeah.
so disconnected from
Mm-hmm.
themselves and their day to day life because they've been doing the same thing sometimes for years and years. It's
Mm.
like you're passively going through life. Like
Absolutely. They're not
yeah.
switched on, they're not engaged. And that, of course, then makes
Mhm.
everything seem to fly by all the more. And it leaves them with no memory or real recollection of how they spent that time, which can make it feel like that time is, in effect, wasted.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Mhm.
it's a huge, huge, huge thing. I think
Mhm.
also what happens to us as we go through life sometimes is that we add more and more things. So
Mm.
we don't take anything away, we just
Right.
add more and more and more. And
Right.
that can really add to that cranking effect of the hamster wheel. Faster and
Mhm.
faster and faster and faster it goes,
Yes. Yeah.
year after year.
Yeah.
And this results in this kind of stop the world, I want to get off feel, which
Right.
I know I've definitely felt a few times in the past.
Mhm.
Just, stop the world, I want to get off. Like, I need some
Yes.
space, I need some reset time.
Mhm.
And a lot of people often obviously use their holidays
Right.
for that reset time.
Mhm.
And then anything that they've been kind of holding within themselves, they're waiting to deal with, as you said, whether
Mhm.
they were waiting to deal with it on the weekend and it took up all
Right.
the weekend, whether they
Yes.
were waiting to deal with it and it was not enough time for the weekend or they wanted
Mhm.
more space, they spend their whole holiday either recovering from
Mhm.
their normal life
Yes.
or doing those things that they didn't have time for. And then they
Mhm.
can kind of look back thinking, well, what happened? Where did my holiday go?
Right.
And getting a bit resentful of the life that they are
Mhm.
actually, in effect, every day
Mhm.
creating and perpetuating.
Right. And this is very often where fatigue happens and, workplace
Mm,
burnout. And I always, like to use the analogy of a juggler, right? Like you
yeah.
were saying, like people keep compounding tasks without dropping any. So what
Mm,
happens? Imagine a juggler,
mm,
right? You're juggling balls. A juggler can juggle so many balls and they
mm,
can manage it.
mm,
But imagine you keep throwing a ball at the
mm,
juggler and they don't put one down, and then you throw another
mm.
ball. Eventually, they're going to drop all the balls,
Yeah,
right? And
exactly.
that's exactly what happens to people when they just burn out. They've literally dropped all the balls.
Exactly. Juggling balls, spinning plates. We feel it,
Mhm.
right? We feel
Mhm.
that as we kind of add more and more to our lives.
Yeah.
We feel like this crazy person that's just running from thing to thing, that's really just
Mhm.
trying to do several things at once, maybe even.
Right.
Yeah, we definitely feel it. And that's a bit different if it's happening on a specific one off or for a specific set time period where we
Mhm.
know it's going to be busy.
Right.
But the trouble is, if we get into this cycle as well of saying to ourselves, it'll be
Mhm.
okay, I'll just get past a set date or a set event
Mm.
or a set issue that's happening. And
Mhm.
after that, it'll be smooth sailing.
Right.
Because essentially, life is never 100% smooth sailing
Yeah.
for very, very long. So
Exactly.
realistically, what we're doing is we're just setting ourselves a false horizon, and then we're shifting the
Mhm.
goalposts. As we know, if we go out on a sailboat and we sail for the horizon,
Mhm.
once we
Mhm.
get there to the point we were looking at,
Yeah.
there's going to be a new
Something else comes
horizon.
up,
Yeah.
right? So like this is why, it's so important to have that internal locus of control, like
Mm,
learning to find peace within yourself no matter what's going on around you, because
mm,
there's always potentially going to be chaos and things
mm,
that come up. So it's like, oh, I just need to get through this. And then, like you said, you get through it, but then something else comes up, right?
mm,
And that's why it's so important to find that stability and peace within ourselves, because it's life, we're here to
mm.
evolve and grow. And like, unfortunately, things are always going to come up that can cause us stress and anxiety, right? So
Yeah.
it's really learning how to navigate the waters, adjust the sails, so to speak,
Yeah.
instead of letting the external circumstances control, because then you're just going to get rocked. Like you're going to get rocked through life, because when it's not that thing, then it's something else. And then when you're done with that, well, then it's something else, right? So the more you can kind of learn to flow with it, maintain that sense of stability within, the easier you're going to navigate those waters.
Yeah, and the idea that a lot is happening at once,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I think the key to that is to actually look through it and see how these things are linked or connected.
Mm.
So there's a linkage between things usually if they're happening at once.
Mm.
There's some kind of connection or link and some kind of choice factor that you have within that that you can
Mm.
maybe balance or prioritize
Right.
or get someone else involved. Can you delegate something? Can you postpone something? Can
Yes.
you, and just having that self-compassion. We talked about the
Mm-hmm.
self-relationship house, right?
Yes.
That self-compassion for yourself, to know that you cannot come from this non-firm base. You need this firm foundation.
Mm-hmm.
You need these solid walls, this solid roof. Otherwise, everything else is going to suffer.
Right.
It's really, really, really important.
Yeah, and this comes down to self-awareness, right? Like you need to have that self-awareness of, am I just blindly picking up more and more tasks?
Mm.
It's like you need to really stop. When you
Mm.
commit to taking on a new task, you need to
Mm.
ask yourself, what am I putting down?
Yes, exactly.
Right?
And
And
we
too
don't
many
want
people
to,
just
right?
blindly just pick up more and more tasks, and then they wonder why they've
Exactly.
dropped all the balls and they're burnt out, right? So
Yeah.
this has to do again with being in robot mode, right? And not having that self-awareness. Before I say yes to this, what am I putting down?
But also, so I
Right?
used to be terrible at this, by the way. I would
Mm-hmm.
just add more and more and more in and just expect more and more of myself. And I was
Oh,
putting more
right.
pressure on myself than anyone
Yes.
else in the world was,
Yes.
because, that's the way it goes sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but one of the things I've really realized actually is I've learned to put tasks down and I've learned to focus on
Mm.
fewer things.
Right.
One of the things I notice is that every day, pretty
Mm-hmm.
much, something comes up that I hadn't anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Yes.
becomes, I have to assess it, but it becomes potentially there's one immediate task every
Mm-hmm.
day. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
immediate or it's urgent or
Right.
something has to be done in that day.
Yes.
So I can't schedule my entire day,
Mm-hmm.
because even if I optimistically schedule it in a way that I could
Mm-hmm.
achieve it all,
Mm-hmm.
I've not left time for
Exactly.
anything to come up.
Exactly.
And I've certainly not left time for anything to be created by me
Right.
that didn't exist
Right.
beforehand, or I
Yes.
have left no space.
Yes.
This is something, having worked in academia, this is something
Mm.
I really see that's happened to the academic world,
Mm-hmm.
where there used to be spaces allocated for academics to actually think and create
Mm.
new. They're
Oh,
now, those are
interesting.
all filled with
Wow.
classes, with scheduled activities, with meetings, with administrative
That's so
tasks.
scary.
They're all filled out with things they need to do. So
Yeah.
actually, that space of actually thinking has been taken
Mm.
up by
Wow.
rescheduling of everything and overscheduling.
Mm.
Yeah. So, but this space is actually really important because it's in this space we create. Now, to
Exactly.
create, I don't just mean art. I don't just mean,
Mm-hmm.
although art is very valid.
Mm-hmm.
I don't just
Mm-hmm.
mean writing, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't just mean art.
Yeah.
An entrepreneur is creating.
Right.
Even if you're working, so if you're working as administrative assistant within an
Mm-hmm.
office,
Mm-hmm.
you could create a new process by which something is done that
Mm-hmm.
makes it more smooth, or
Mm-hmm.
you could create a new system,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. You're
Mm-hmm.
creating within whatever area you work. We are
Mm-hmm.
creative beings, so we are
Mm-hmm.
creating within that,
Mm-hmm.
except not if we don't make time for it.
Well, and not if people are allocated time for it, right? I mean, it
Mm,
really makes me question the intentions of institutions,
mm,
right? It's like, how come you aren't making time for
yeah,
that? How come you aren't giving your employees time to be creative and think
yeah.
instead of just turning them into robots, essentially, where they don't think,
Exactly, this kind of
right?
this repetitive environment that we go in, and we
Mm-hmm.
might not even wake up till lunchtime. We might
Mm-hmm.
kind of drift in through our morning and through our early
Mm-hmm.
day, and then
Mm-hmm.
only wake up in time for coffee or something.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of kick starts us and brings us to life,
Mm-hmm.
and then we can find that actually we're actually going through our day a little bit like zombies.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
This kind of robotic or zombified approach to our day. And
Yes.
existing in our life like this, kind of being in our life this way, is really something that can lead to this kind of burnout, this
Mm-hmm.
anxiety and stress about just going to work, being in the work environment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I see people present with over and over and over again.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, and what it is a misalignment of
Mm,
values, right? And
mm,
people, again, the more that we're in robotic mode, the
Mm.
less time we have to actually think,
Mm.
the further away we become from our authentic
Mm.
selves, the more disconnected we
Mm.
become, the more we focus on our external environment instead of our internal environment, right?
Yeah.
And this is when, people tend to show up in my office and they're like, my job is soulless. I don't feel like I have a purpose, right?
Right.
And I've been there too. And it's sitting down and doing that
Mm.
reassessment of values, because if you're feeling like you have no direction in life, if you're feeling like you have no sense of purpose, if you're
Mm.
feeling like you're going to a job every day that kind of, quote unquote, feels soulless,
Mm.
and you're kind of just there to collect the paycheck, these are
Mm.
all signs that it's time to stop and reflect on
Mm.
your values.
Yes, like what are you
Mm-hmm.
doing and why are you doing it?
Right.
And I know a lot of us would say, well, you have to work because you need the money to live.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Mm-hmm.
is very true.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have some kind of other engagement in your life, then actually that moves towards a deeper value, that you have a
Mm-hmm.
deeper purpose, a sense of
Mm-hmm.
meaning in your
Mm-hmm.
life, then I think that's what can leave you feeling adrift.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think also one of the things I've noticed, and I used to not realize this at all actually,
Mm-hmm.
but one of the things I've realized is that it's not necessarily your work that needs to bring you that sense of purpose. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. It
Mm-hmm.
could be that your work brings in the money, and then your
Mm-hmm.
sense of purpose actually comes from something else you do in life
Mm-hmm.
alongside.
Mm-hmm.
Then maybe in the future you move towards working part time and focusing
Mm-hmm.
on your purpose part time. It's
Mm-hmm.
about balancing the funds, but it doesn't all
Right.
have to come from work.
Yeah. And it's also looking at challenging these mindsets as well, of like, what makes you think that you can do what you love and also make money? Like,
Mm,
of course, we all have to
that's true.
live and we all have to do something to make money. No one's
Mm,
arguing that. But
mm,
like, why do you think that you need to do this to make money?
mm,
Why do you think you need to do a job that you don't like to make money?
mm.
Why don't you think that you can do something that you love and also make money? Right.
Yeah,
So, like, mindset has a huge role in this too. And then
yeah.
asking yourself, well, where are these belief systems coming from? Why do I think that I have to do something
Mm,
that I don't like to survive and make money? Is this like conditioning? Is this like societal
mm,
messaging that we're getting from institutions, from the
mm,
world around us, that
mm,
are just like subconsciously shaping these belief systems? But like,
mm.
it's equally fair to say you can make money and do what you love. Like, why would you think that you can't?
You can
Right?
definitely. You can make
Yeah.
money doing what you love,
Mm-hmm.
and you can do what you love either way. And essentially, you can do what you choose in life. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of people are, not recognizing the choice that they have over what they're
Mm-hmm.
doing, where they're going every day, and they're
Mm-hmm.
feeling more. I guess I felt it myself in the past. Maybe you have
Mm-hmm.
too.
Mm-hmm.
They're feeling more kind of roped in to the system of
Oh yeah.
going from 9 to 5 every day or whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is, but
Yeah.
feeling more kind of like a cog in a bigger wheel.
Mm-hmm.
But the bigger wheel doesn't really feel like something that's their purpose, that's their values,
Right.
that have built it.
Right. Yeah. It's like
Mm.
that question of whose values are you living?
Mm.
Whose dream are you living
Yeah.
right now? If it's not your own, it's someone else's.
Absolutely.
Right.
And is that someone else? If you do want to exist not really as
Mm-hmm.
the entrepreneur, but as someone
Mm-hmm.
within the entrepreneur's world,
Mm-hmm.
is their dream something that aligns with your values as well and your dreams as well?
Exactly.
Are you getting on board with somebody whose vision you can actually see?
You believe in. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that kind of question over it where you can have a look and see, are you
Mm-hmm.
working in a field that inspires you, that links through to your sense
Mm-hmm.
of purpose, values, and giving meaning to your life?
Absolutely. And sometimes it might not be actually what you're doing that you don't enjoy, it's the system that is
Mm,
within it. So, for example, when I was working with a corporate company
mm,
as a therapist, it's not that I didn't love being a
mm,
therapist, it's not that I didn't love the client work, but when you're working within a system as
mm,
well, like I identified one of my main values is freedom. Well, how much
mm,
freedom do you have when you're working for a corporate company?
mm,
Right? They dictate it, how many clients you get to see
mm,
every day, how many hours you have to work that Monday to Friday. There is no flexibility, right? So it's really looking at, is it the job that I don't like the actual day-to-day task, or is it the system that I'm working within, right? And because my value was freedom, it was the system I was working within, not so much the work that I was doing. So when I took that work and I stepped outside of the system and what was operating, I actually really enjoyed it, right? So sometimes it's that self-awareness of, okay, is it the job itself, or is it just, one of my values is freedom, and I just can't do this, this being told what to do, this lack of creativity, right? If you have someone whose value is creativity and they're working in a job where, like you said, they don't have time to be creative, of course they're not gonna appreciate that job,
Yeah, but
right?
if their values are around raising their family and around having them, they decide they want structure in their workplace and they
Right.
don't want too much responsibility at work because they're feeling the weight of the responsibility at home, then actually it could work really well for someone to go in and
Exactly.
be told what to do, and this
Yeah.
could work for them, and this is all about your personal values, and your
Exactly.
values change as you go through
Yes.
time and through life. And
Yeah.
so it's being open to that change. Where are your values right now?
Mhm.
What are you looking for right
Mhm.
now in your life? And how long do you
Yeah.
think that's going to last?
Yeah, and rather than saying kind of values change, I like to say they shift in priority.
Mm,
So values are very much actually like very ingrained in us.
mm,
So I always say they don't kind of change. Like a value
mm,
system doesn't just change, but it does shift,
mm.
right? So maybe someone's number one value at one point in their life was freedom.
Yeah.
Like that trumped everything. And then maybe now it's being replaced by stability. It doesn't mean that freedom still doesn't exist within them,
True.
but maybe it's like value number 5 instead of value number 1. So of course it's going to change how you choose to show
Exactly.
up,
How you
right?
reflect those values in your life. The
Mhm.
values you have are part of who you are, but
Exactly.
those
Yeah.
values you have and how you reflect them in your life are going
Mhm.
to alter throughout your lifespan,
Exactly.
depending on what you're prioritizing at any given time.
Right.
And so that
Yeah.
same person who felt that weight of responsibility at home raising a family at one point, so
Mhm.
didn't want that weight of responsibility at work,
Mhm.
might find that later on in life, as the kids head off to
Exactly.
university or something themselves or into jobs, that
Mhm.
actually they are more open and wanting to take on a role in a workplace of
Exactly.
responsibility. Or they
Exactly.
might find that they're happy to let that role in the job tick while they set up their own endeavor at
Exactly.
home,
Right.
as a home business. So
Yeah.
it really depends. Everybody is different, and what's right for
Mhm.
one person isn't necessarily right for the other. And it does
Absolutely.
change through life as
And
well.
yeah, and that's the thing, remembering that values are dynamic and that
Mm.
they shift, right?
Yeah.
So it's always important. I always say to people, and even for myself, to do like a reassessment of your
Mm.
values every 6 months, especially if
Mm.
you're starting to feel
Mm.
things aren't feeling right anymore. Like, I
Mm.
was really excited about this project 6 months or a year ago, but I'm not feeling excited
Mm.
anymore. That's probably an indication that there's some kind of shift happening, right? It was,
Yeah.
personally the same with me and traveling. Like, I was just like, freedom was number one. And like, I equated that to travel. So travel, travel, travel all the time was like the
Mm.
most important thing to me, right? But then you get to a point and it's just like, I'm not as excited about this
Mm.
anymore, right? It's like I'm not having that same drive. So it's that sitting down and being like, well, why is that? What's going on within me? Am I valuing stability more now,
Mm.
right? So when things just don't start feeling as maybe like exciting anymore, you're not feeling as motivated to do something, it's probably an indication that values have shifted. And to stop then and do that reflection, because if you kind of keep going, you're just going to dig yourself deeper in that hole of, what's my purpose? I don't feel satisfied. I'm not feeling any purpose.
So would you say then that your values are like your compass?
Yeah.
And so working out what your values are and working out
Yes.
what priority order they're coming in for you
Yes.
is actually giving you some kind of guidance. So it's your own GPS system in a
Absolutely.
way
It's
for
an
your path.
internal compass that directs
Mm.
us on where to go. So, the premise is like, the more aligned we are with our values, the less anxious we're going to feel, the
Mm.
less depressed we're going to feel, the
Yeah.
less dissatisfaction we're going to feel, right? The further away we are from our values, the more anxious we're going to feel, the more depressed. So,
Mm.
when I'm working with a client and they're having all of these, feelings of low mood, anxiety, but I always notice the correlation is they're living far, far away from their values, right? So we can always, again, use our feelings as a gauge to tell us exactly where we need to be. I truly believe feelings are messengers, right? So if we're having these feelings of sadness, low mood, anxiety, that's our body telling us to stop and reflect, right? Because we're not aligning with that internal compass that's trying to direct us.
Yeah, and then I always say to people as well that actually their long-term values, their ongoing values, and what short-term matters to them can actually help guide an ease of flow in day-to-day life as well.
Yes.
So this is a day-to-day flow. So for example, if I'm going to have a walk down to the ocean front, which way am I going to go? Well, if I don't know which way to go, I can see what I'm valuing at the time. Maybe I have a letter to post and one direction goes past a post box. Maybe I need to pick up some milk at the shop on the way back and one direction goes past the shop. This is a very simple example, but you can see how actually you can create ease of flow in your daily life just by remembering what your values are. Maybe like right down to the beginning of that. If I'm going out for a walk, what do I value regarding what direction I'm going to go in? Am I going to walk down towards the ocean? Because do I value that expansive, open freedom feel that I get? Or am I going to walk through the town centre where everything is bustling and busy? Which one? There'll be different things for different people, but it does depend upon your what matters to you for that day as well. Because walking through the town might lead you through the market and you can pick up some fruit and vegetables, but walking along the beach might mean that you get to leave your phone at home, and actually leaving that technology behind for half an hour could be really, really good.
Yes, yeah. So that recognition that, not getting so caught up in thinking values, we need to live them one way. Like we can live out our values in multiple ways. So for example, for me, the longest time, like I was just like freedom travel, but like realistically, not everybody can travel. Maybe they have a value of freedom and they can't travel because they have a family or because, financial reasons, whatever. It's recognizing that we can choose to live our values in the day to day, right? So yeah, maybe you can't buy that plane ticket right now, but maybe you can choose to take that quiet walk and be free down to the ocean, or maybe you can plan a weekend trip out of the city or out of your town to give you that sense of freedom as well, right? So it's the same with someone who values creativity. How many ways can you exercise creativity? You could write a book, you could do art, you could draw. There's so many ways that we can create. So, remembering that too, not getting caught up in like, there's only one way to live my values. You can live them in so many different ways. And I think that's important to remember.
And I think remembering as well that we all see things different ways. So for example, when you said about equating freedom with travel, I thought to myself, I immediately thought of people I know who have to go on a lot of business trips based on their job. So for them, the travel is not the freedom. The travel is kind of a bind of their job.
It's another
and
commitment.
Okay, maybe they enjoy it sometimes. But actually, I talk to a lot of people who would rather not be traveling so often for their job. And so they would rather, because it takes the time out of the time that they can spend at home, and it exhausts
they could
them
value
on top
family.
of their job. And so then they're not really feeling as active for all the other activities they want to do in their life. So it really depends who you are as to what you see as bringing these different values to life. So somebody could value freedom, and what they might see as freedom is being able to take the dog out and the kids out and leave the phone at home for 3 hours on a morning and just walk along the hilltops overlooking the ocean. And that for them could embody freedom far more than getting everyone packed up and getting them to the airport, or even just themselves getting them packed up and getting them to the airport, packed on a plane. It's not necessarily the same incarnation of that feeling of freedom.
Right. Yeah. So it's asking yourself, what does this look like to me? Right? What does stability look like to me? What does freedom look like to me? Because like you said, it's different for everybody. So really asking yourself, what does ... look like to me? What does creativity look like to me?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. And I think this is where doing something like a mood board can actually help for
Mm,
somebody, because they can go through, I mean, old style, you can go through magazines and cut
mm-hmm.
out images. A lot of us
Yeah.
don't really have physical magazines these
Yes.
days, but you
Yes.
can just go through and on whether it's PowerPoint or Keynote, or there are some
Mm-hmm.
specific apps for creating these mood
Yes.
boards, these
Yes.
vision boards. You can actually go through online and screenshot and clip out those images.
Mm-hmm.
And that really can bring to life what those
Mm-hmm.
different values that you've given a word to, what
Yes.
they mean to you. How do you vision them? How do you see
Yes.
yourself living them out?
Yeah, exactly. And it's always nice to have a visualization to look at, right? I
Mm,
remember like I made my first vision board when I was like 19. So this was back when like magazines were super popular, and I
mm,
had like a box of magazines,
mm,
and I just got a Bristol board and I flipped through the magazines, and
mm,
just like anything that kind of called to me, I just cut it out and I
mm-hmm,
put it on the board, and I didn't think much. I'm just like, "Oh, I like this beach. Oh, I like
mm,
this palm tree. Oh,
mm,
I this plane," right? So like I just cut stuff out, and then I looked and I'm like, wow, this says so much about
mm,
what I value right now. And it was so nice to be able to look back at that vision board. There was lots of pictures of beaches, random cities, different countries, planes. It was so nice to actually look back at that vision board and be like, oh my gosh, I actually lived out
mm.
that vision, right? And sometimes it can be nice, even like subconsciously, to have that reminder, because it tells you a lot about what your heart truly wants, you
Absolutely.
know?
And you can think about how you can bring it into your day to day life as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
So I know that the last time I did a vision board, I
Mhm.
really saw connection in work. I saw
Mm.
myself having somewhere inspiring to work alone.
Mm.
So I could set up a nice kind of supported, self supported home office, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
But actually, I also saw I'd put up images of people connecting and working together.
Mm.
And
It's
so you can
community.
bring that to life by
Yes.
actually talking to people more at work, by
Yes.
asking for more connected tasks, by
Mhm.
suggesting group work on different projects and things
Mhm.
like that. You can actually bring, instead of needing to necessarily change your entire working environment or quit your job or
Mhm.
this kind of thing,
Mhm.
that can be an answer, you
Mhm.
know, but it can also be that you can bring more of what you
Mhm.
want to the life and the job you already have.
Mhm.
It doesn't
Or
necessarily mean you have to scrap the whole lot and
right.
start
Or
again.
even potentially switching roles within that
Mm,
job, or like going to a different department, maybe taking on like a new role that's more creative,
mm,
right? So sometimes it's learning to work with what's already being offered to you
mm,
through your current employer, right? And
mm-hmm,
hopefully you're with an employer who would be open
mm,
to that, right?
mm. Yeah, talking
Mhm.
with them about it, being
Mhm.
interested and active, and it's stating to them that
Mhm.
you're looking for ways you can be better in your job, because if
Yes.
you're better in yourself, if you're feeling better in yourself, you will innately
Mhm.
um, bring that through in your work
Mhm.
as well. So it's not just
Mhm.
better for you, it's better for everyone. And I
Mhm.
think bearing that in mind, that this is not a selfish approach.
Right.
This is not, oh well, I don't want to do it their way.
Mhm.
This is opening a door to a new way that might
Mhm.
actually be better for everyone.
Right. Yeah. And then when you're outside of work as well, it's asking how you're aligning with those values,
Mm,
right? Especially if you're in a position with your job where you're like, well, I just can't quit right now. So
mm,
it's looking at how, okay, how can this, what I do outside of work almost be a buffer to
mm,
help me get through what I need to do until I'm able to maybe evolve or make a move, right?
mm,
So it's looking at what can I do in the evenings? What can I do on the weekends? If you feel like you can't create at your job, then maybe you can create at home, or maybe you can join a paint night once a
mm,
week. Maybe
mm,
you can join some kind of group, right? Maybe you
mm,
can go to a writer's group. Maybe you can put 2 hours aside on a Sunday morning and do some writing. And these are very important, and that I don't have time for it, and I always say to my clients, and it might sound
mm,
harsh, there's just no excuse,
mm,
right? There is no excuse to say I don't have time, because I don't have time is it's not a priority. And living by your values
mm.
should always be a priority,
Absolutely. And I think
right?
it's also about asking yourself,
Mhm.
if money were no object, what would
Mm.
I be doing? And I know when I say that to people,
Mhm.
a lot of people say, well, I wouldn't do anything. I'd have a rest. I'd take some time out. I'd travel.
Mhm.
I'd do some of the fun activities I do.
Mhm.
And to that, I always say, okay, and what then? Like after you've rested for a few days or a week or a month, after you've watched all the things you didn't feel like you had time to on television and seen the movies that you didn't feel like you had time for, after you've had time to go for a walk, you know, several times a day, after you've traveled to a few places that you feel like you might have missed out on, what then? Like, what is it then that you would do if money was no object? Because we actually get to a point where that kind of rest and that kind of recuperation, while it can seem like an addiction when we are burned out and feel like, oh, I just want to stop, just you know, stop the wheel, I want to get off. Actually, once you've recuperated, what are you going to do with that energy that you have rebuilt? Because we all have this drive that we have towards purpose. So what is your purpose? What do you value? What brings meaning to your life? And then how does that connect with others? How can that bring a greater meaning to more lives? How can that interact across more people? And in that, you find that crossover, you find that kind of golden thread that links your values, your purpose, and your meaning with others. And in that can be a path to find a real soul-led career path.
Absolutely. And, you know, when you're doing something that lights you up and something that you love, you're naturally going to be more creative. You're naturally going to be more motivated to do it and to focus on it and to really think like, this is something I love. How can I potentially turn this into a business idea? Right.
So what about you? If money was no object, what would you be doing?
I would be doing exactly what I'm doing now.
I know,
like I'm so happy to say that I'm living by my values. Like I am, because I went through this phase where like I was so out of whack with my values. Like I was over here, my values were over here. I was like struggling with anxiety. I was so stressed. I wasn't healthy, you know, so I've been through it. So I get it, but I've jumped off that hamster wheel. And I am 100% aligned with my values. Like I absolutely love what I do now, and I live out my values every single day, and life has gotten so much better. And I notice the more kind of you're on that path, you're living your values, things just kind of get easier and fall into place. Like you're not fighting as much, you're not pushing as much, right? And it's such a nice feeling. It's such a great feeling.
I feel it too, because I think I went through a large period of my life where I was doing what I thought I should do, what I thought I was supposed to do. And once I realized, it was actually a bit shocking. It was a bit like the ground opening beneath my feet when I realized
wake up call
that this was me choosing all of this, that nobody was making me do this, that when I got up in the morning, having sieged kind of effortlessly in a way between, you know, being got up for school and packaged off to a place we all had to go to, I then was getting myself up and packaging myself off to the next steps of my life. And it was a bit shocking to realize that, shocking and beautiful once I took it on board, once I actually opened up to it. It was really beautiful that I got to choose how I spent every day of my life. And I think it's also a really interesting echo that runs through me now all the time, because whenever something is not right in my life, I kind of wryly remind myself that something I'm choosing is creating this. Something I'm choosing is bringing this about and is bringing this on. And so that kind of, I don't always want to think about that. I don't always want to see it that way. But yeah, to actually notice the agency I have in what I'm creating.
That choice that you have, right?
Very liberating. And so that's freedom to me, actually.
It is freedom.
You say it's a plane, but for me, the freedom, I see freedom as recognizing that I'm the creator of my own situation and circumstance.
Yeah, and what I've noticed is like people can get so almost like defensive when you tell them they have a choice. And I've seen this with people personally and professionally, when you remind them you're choosing this, like it's almost like people, they don't want to hear it. Like they don't want to accept that they're choosing it. And I don't know if it's like the defense mechanism, but they'll literally say they're in this mindset of, no, but I have to do it.
Victim narrative.
They're in the victim narrative, the victim mentality. And you know, what I always remind myself, what I always remind others is, you know, literally it's just a change in mindset. There's the victim mindset, and then there's the mindset of, curiosity. There's the mindset of faith. And, those two mindsets are going to take you in such different places in life. Like if you keep following the victim mindset, you're going to end up here. And if you follow the curiosity, the faith mindset that I am a creator of my own life, you're going to end up over here. Like it's literally in the mind, right?
And once we've recognized, I tried to go back on that a few times. So I'd already recognized a little bit that I had some choice in this, but it was too much for me to take on immediately.
Right, yeah.
Really. But once you've recognized it, there actually is no going back.
Yes.
Because you've already noticed the door that you've created, the kind of prison you've created around your own mind. Yeah. And so then you're holding the key. And the thing is, it's just really a matter of time before you put that key in the lock and turn it.
And you walk out.
And what I would say to people is, when it's a matter of time like that, I would say that you're always going to be happier to do something sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
You're always going to be happier to have started that journey sooner rather than later. Because I do see a lot of people avoiding it, numbing to it and avoiding it. And really it is there waiting. That truth that you've already half noticed is a truth. And it's there waiting. And so do you want to recognize it when you're retiring?
Right.
Do you want to recognize it when you're 70 or 80 years old? Or do you want to take a deep breath, get some support and help, and recognize it now?
Yes.
And make some steps forwards into aligning with your values, working out what your values are.
Yes.
Have you got any tips for people trying to identify their values?
Yeah. So, and kind of what we already touched on is asking yourself, if money weren't an issue, what would I be doing right now? So if I were to say, okay, money's not an issue, I would be doing what I'm doing right now. So I would be traveling. I would be writing my books. I would be running a podcast. I would be talking to clients, helping them find their values, helping them find their purpose, right? And when you look at, okay, so I'm saying all of these things, what does that say about my values? Well, obviously there's a value of freedom there. The travel, I would want to write a book. Obviously there's a value of creativity there, right? I would want to work with clients and help them find their values. Well, obviously there's a value of helping others there, right? So the more kind of in tune you get with values, like I feel like I can have a conversation with someone and after like 2 minutes, I'm like, value number 1, value number 2, like just by telling someone like, tell me what you enjoy doing. And there's always an underlying value, right? So it's also looking at what you enjoy doing and then asking yourself, why, what is it about that I enjoy? Right. Yeah. So if someone says they enjoy painting, well, what is it about painting that you enjoy? Is it the creative aspect of it? Is it that you get to share these paintings with others? Like all of this stuff
is it doing something physical rather than something that's maybe on a computer? I think it's a really awesome thing, and I think actually we can use that to start to notice where in our current lives we can get more in line with our values.
Right.
And I think sometimes, though, I've noticed in my past that it can be a little bit difficult when some elements of your life already seem very aligned with your values and some elements aren't. And so then it kind of feels like a bit like, and it's beautiful in some ways, but in another way it can feel like you're being stuck in a rock and a hard place, because the thing is, you might feel like you have to give up some of what you have in order to get something else. And so that can feel kind of risky. That can feel like jumping off the edge of the cliff into the unknown. So I think at that point it's where we start to look at how we feel about ourselves, and we start to turn it back around, looking at ourselves and saying, do I trust myself to be able to create that which I have and I don't want to lose? I've created it once. Do I trust myself to be able to create it again?
Yeah. And it comes back again to the relationship house, right? So if you find that you can't trust yourself enough, that you will figure it out, or if you find that you don't have enough confidence, right? This involves confidence to figure it out, then that's a sign right there of, maybe I need to go back to that room and I need to work on that, right? Because the more that we trust ourselves to figure something out, the more likely we are to get out of that victim mentality and step into one of faith and trust and curiosity, right? And it's looking back and really recognizing your own power. Like, think of a tough situation and how you navigated out of it. Like, we've all been
Mm.
there. We've all been in situations that weren't
Mm.
ideal, and we've all figured it out one way or
Yeah.
another. Like, remind yourself, like, I figured this out before. What makes me think I can't figure it out this time?
Exactly. Something that felt like the end of the world a couple of years ago
Yes.
might now be something that you almost don't even think about or can't recall very
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
So just recognizing how much you've achieved, how much you've managed to get through, and
Right.
recognizing that you're actually more capable than maybe we're giving ourselves credit for.
Right. Yeah. And using that as a springboard to keep you going, right?
Mm.
Reminding yourself that you've gotten through this before. So, what makes you think you can't get through this? You figured
Mm.
that out before. What makes you think you can't figure this out? Right. And remembering that it's all temporary as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we're going through like tough times, it takes up our entire world, and we kind
Mm.
of lose that ability to realize this is really just going to be a memory one day. Like, this is
Right.
just a small blip in the story of my life. It is not my whole life.
Will I care
Right.
about this in a year? Will I
Well,
care about
yes.
this in 5 years?
Yes.
That's something that I like to bear in mind when there is an issue going on at work,
Right.
specifically.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can apply that to any area of life, but
Mm-hmm.
specifically with work, I find that it becomes very key to remember, am I going to ask myself, am I going to care about this in a year? Am I going to care about this in 5 years? Because sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I think we can become over fixated because work might feel
Mm-hmm.
like that thing that's bringing us safety and security.
Yeah.
Our ego mind can get over fixated on making
Mm-hmm.
sure it's perfected, making
Mm-hmm.
sure we do it as well as possible, making
Mm-hmm.
sure it's there for us.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, does it really matter as much as we
Exactly.
think it's going to? Is it
Right.
really an end of the world situation,
Right.
life or death?
And most of the time we realize it won't
Mm.
matter. Like, no,
Mm.
this actually won't matter in 5 years. This
Mm.
actually won't matter in 6 months.
Mm.
Right. So that can really help put things into perspective as well. Right.
Mm.
And when we are at that point where we're feeling, burnt out in life and at work, it's, that reminder of assessing the balls, and like, we
Mm.
only have so much energy every
Mm-hmm.
day, and I'm so aware now of where I allocate my energy to,
Yeah.
because I know I only have so much energy, and
Mm.
some days I'm just running on lower energy, and we all are, and it's literally, sometimes I ask myself, is this a safety issue? Like,
Mm.
is if I don't address this, is someone going to get hurt, or am I going to get hurt?
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I go to the basics, like, is this something that's going to matter now in a month? And if I'm saying, like, no, this isn't a safety issue, this isn't going to matter in a month, sometimes I'm like, I'm not going to give my energy to it today because I just
Mm.
simply don't have the reserves, right? So sometimes it's
Mm.
literally going basic. Like, if this isn't a safety issue, I can't deal with it today,
Finding out how
right?
to prioritize things
Finding out how to
and give yourself the
prioritize.
space. Yeah,
Yes.
because I think there's a few different ways to look at burnout. Because burnout can
Mm-hmm.
be because you're taking on too much, like it's
Mm-hmm.
essential overwhelm. But it can
Yeah.
also be because you feel that although you're getting through everything that you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
what you're getting through is kind of not worth anything to you. So
Right. Yeah.
whichever one it is, I think it's
Mm-hmm.
about realizing and understanding
Yes.
where you're at peace and where you're frustrated and where your
Mm-hmm.
frustrations are coming from. So
Mm-hmm.
at the end of a day, kind of
Yeah.
looking at your life, looking
Yeah.
back on the day in a nice reflective way, not with a
Mm-hmm.
heavy, heavy hand, with
Yes.
compassion, self-compassion.
Mm-hmm.
But just looking back and thinking to yourself, am I at peace about what I achieved today?
Mm-hmm.
Do I feel like I didn't achieve enough? And is that a reasonable feeling? Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we always want to manage more, right?
Right.
But
Yes.
it might not be a reasonable feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's reasonable to have the feeling, but it's
Yeah.
not reasonable to ask yourself to
Exactly.
do more than you
Yes.
can.
Yeah.
So acknowledging that and just being with it, but
Mm-hmm.
recognizing, yeah, I'm not a robot. Mm.
Exactly. And that's okay,
And
right?
then,
Yeah.
yeah, so looking back on that, or am I frustrated? When I look back on my day, am I frustrated? And why? Why
Mm-hmm.
was that? And I found some very interesting things by looking at this in my own life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I actually picked out some frustration points that I could
Mm.
deal with and I could work with
Right.
that I hadn't noticed or known were frustration points for me. So I
Mm-hmm.
picked out, once it was a particular colleague,
Mm-hmm.
particular person who was a colleague in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and they were actually driving me up
Mm.
the pole. You know, they were just,
Yeah.
it was really just challenging dealing with them.
Mm,
And so fine, I could limit my dealings with them.
right.
I could be clear
Yes.
with them in a written way
Yes.
that I could then bring back to their attention,
Exactly.
rather
Yeah.
than vocally, where they were
Yes.
often saying that they didn't hear me or didn't remember me saying, or I didn't say that.
Yes.
That's a difficult one when you're
Yeah.
being minorly
Yeah.
gaslit at work.
Mhm.
But so yeah, actually
Mhm.
finding where you have choice, where you have control, where you can make moves
Exactly.
to improve your own situation.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes it involves reducing frequency of the interaction, because
Mm,
sometimes in the workplace, you can't just cut that person
mm,
off because for whatever reason you have to, I don't know, you just have to talk to them, you have to
mm-hmm.
coordinate with them. So in those situations, yeah, it's like, can I send them an email instead of needing to see them face to
Exactly.
face? How can I reduce my interaction with them? I don't need to hang out with them in the lunchroom,
And it can be better
right?
for everyone. So
Mm-hmm.
another thing that came up for me was that I didn't feel like I was getting, and this was in the past, I didn't feel like I was getting enough done because I was attending too many meetings, long, ongoing meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I started to do was I started to limit the amount of time I was available for meetings
Yeah.
and really work out whether a meeting was going to be worthwhile, and then limit the number of meetings I was available for.
Mm-hmm.
And what this did was it improved everything for everyone, because
Mm-hmm.
all around me I found that meetings were actually getting shorter and
Mm-hmm.
more to the point. But
Mm-hmm.
there was also a little bit of conversation beforehand and afterwards that
Yeah.
had been made time for in that space.
Right.
And then we were having fewer meetings. So
Mm.
actually, it wasn't a grinding case of seeing the same faces several times a week necessarily. It was actually once a week, and then it was nice to see them the next time around. And we were
Right.
really getting somewhere and really moving forwards. So
Mm-hmm.
everyone felt better about it, and everyone felt like they had more time. So
Yes.
it can really be a good thing for everyone, for
Mm-hmm.
someone to move into this. But
Yeah.
obviously, depending on your position in the company, you might
Mm-hmm.
want to do it in hand with your company, just
Mm-hmm.
saying to them, you know, I've been thinking about the number of meetings I'm attending, and
Mm.
I think it's eating up a lot of my time. Do we want to circulate some notes about what requires a meeting and what doesn't?
Right.
And how long meetings could be limit, how maybe you could limit the
Mm.
meeting time and this kind of thing, make it about 3 specific points rather
Yeah.
than 10 or 12. you
Yeah,
know
for sure. And I think, people, managers especially,
mm,
appreciate that when
mm.
someone on their team comes to them with not just a problem, but also a solution,
Yes, solution
right?
focused. This
Solution
is win-win.
focused.
This
Yeah.
isn't you against the world.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very big battle to wage.
Mm-hmm.
I don't suggest anyone
Yes.
wages that battle.
Yes.
It's a very frustrating one. And I speak from experience. It was me against the world at one point in the past,
Mm.
and it didn't do well for me, and it didn't bring the fullness and best of me to the world either.
Yeah.
So yeah, just working on this win-win philosophy, that,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe you've got more than that. Maybe it ends up being win-win-win.
Mm-hmm.
But it's actually making sure that everyone is engaged and everything is engaged in
Yeah.
a way that works for that.
Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah. And, and just going back to, if you feel like you are in a job and you're feeling a lack of purpose, you're
Mm.
feeling like you want to do something else, but you're not sure what that looks like, doing a reassessment of your values, right? And
Mm.
asking yourself the questions that we talked about today in the session. If money weren't an issue, what would I be doing? What do I enjoy doing? And why do I enjoy doing that? Those are
Mm.
both great ways to identify your values. And then once you identify what your values are, go through each one of them, even just starting with the top 3, and ask yourself, now that I know my values, how can I better align with these values in my day to day life? Because the more you align with those values, the more purpose you're going to feel.
Yeah, maybe trying to fill a page with the options of how you can align with each value. Really going
Mm-hmm.
outside the box, really thinking of some wild things that may or may not come up in your life, but opening your mind to some new doors, and even opening to new windows as well. Just new avenues for things to come into your life and ways for you to connect. Thank you for joining us for this session of Soul Therapy.
And we look forward to seeing you in the next session.
Thanks for joining us. We'd love to connect with you live in our group sessions.
Join our online membership to spend weekly group sessions with us, where we will be talking about topics such as depression, anxiety, burnout, relationships, family problems, and addictions as we work with you to develop your health and well-being.
In addition, this includes access to a private Telegram group, weekly actionable exercises with guaranteed general feedback from us. The 12-week membership comes with an exclusive offer of reduced price one-to-one sessions with us for the duration of the 12-week membership.
A lot can change in 12 weeks. Come and join us and jump into the life you choose.
Remember that to get the most out of these soul therapy sessions, whether the free podcast series or the membership, we advise full participation in all the suggested exercises.
Throw yourself into this fully and become the you that you have always dreamed of being.